مرحبا إلى الهند.
Salam India.
Namaste India.
Attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon in the United States in 2001. Move aims to close the book on America's longest war. Bangladesh begins first day of the 8-day long hard lockdown. Low traffic witnessed. Most of the shops in Dhaka remain closed. Lockdown will be enforced till the 21st of April. South Korean President Moon Jae-in orders officials to explore petitioning an international court over Japan's decision to release water from the Fukushima nuclear plant. Japan unveils plans to release more than 1 million tons of contaminated water into the sea from the plant crippled by a 2011 earthquake and tsunami, starting in about 2 years after filtering it to remove harmful isotopes. Union Minister for Environment, Forest and Climate Change Prakash Javadekar addresses event titled From Paris to Glasgow, Stepping Up Global Action on Climate Change, says that India is the only G20 country to negotiate on the Paris Treaty and India has shown more than what it had promised. Jean Drian, the Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs of France, was also present at the event. And world battles COVID-19. Over 13 crore 81 lakh people worldwide have so far tested positive for COVID. Over 11 crore have recovered and over 29 lakh 75,000 people have lost their lives globally. Well, those were the headlines at 6. Let's now begin with the big news. Well, Joe Biden, the US president, has spoken about withdrawing all combat troops from Afghanistan by September 11th. After years of arguing against an extended military presence in Afghanistan, President Biden is doing things his way, with the deadline for withdrawal set for the 20th anniversary of the terrorist attack. Nearly 2,400 American troops have died in Afghanistan in a conflict that has cost about $2 trillion. Biden's Democratic supporters in Congress have praised the withdrawal, even as Republicans said it would risk American security.
US President Joe Biden is all set to withdraw American troops from Afghanistan. The announcement came on Wednesday of a complete US withdrawal from Afghanistan by the 11th of September. It aims to close the book on America's longest war, as critics warn that peace is anything but assured after 2 decades of fighting. The US will miss a May deadline agreed to with the Taliban by his predecessor Donald Trump's administration last year. And the new deadline will coincide with the 20th anniversary of the terror attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon in the US in 2001. As officials disclosed Biden's pull-out plans, the US intelligence community renewed deep concerns on Tuesday about the outlook for the US-backed government in Kabul, which is clinging to an eroding stalemate.
This is an important moment for our alliance. Almost 20 years ago, after the United States was attacked on 9/11, together we went into Afghanistan to deal with those who attacked us and to make sure that Afghanistan would not again become a haven for terrorists who might attack any of us. And together we have achieved the goals that we set out to achieve. And now it is time to bring our forces home. President Biden will speak to this in a few hours in the United States. And I'm here to work closely with our allies, with the Secretary General, on the principle that we've established from the start: in together, adapt together, and out together. We will work very closely together in the weeks and months ahead on a safe, deliberate, and coordinated withdrawal of our forces from Afghanistan. But even as we do that, our commitment to Afghanistan, to its future, will remain.
NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg welcomed the decision.
We welcome this opportunity to closely coordinate and consult with all allies as we agree on our future presence in Afghanistan. So I look forward to the discussion with you and also with the foreign minister and defense ministers later on today.
Meanwhile, Taliban's spokesperson said that the movement would refrain from taking part in any conference until foreign military presence in Afghanistan is ended. The spokesperson said that until all foreign forces completely withdraw from their homeland, the Islamic Emirate will not participate in any conference that will make decisions about Afghanistan. Earlier, the United Nations announced that the Afghan Peace Conference is scheduled to take place in Istanbul from the 24th of April to the 4th of May in cooperation with the government of Qatar. The close ties triggered US military intervention in 2001 following Al-Qaeda's September 11th attacks when Al-Qaeda hijackers slammed airplanes into the World Trade Center in New York City and the Pentagon outside Washington, killing almost 3,000 people. Still, the Biden administration said Al-Qaeda does not pose a threat to the US homeland now. There are only about 2,500 US troops in Afghanistan currently, down from a peak of more than 100,000 in 2011. About 2,400 US service members have been killed in the course of the Afghan conflict and many thousands more wounded. All eyes are now on Biden's move and how it would impact upcoming talks in Istanbul from the 24th of April to the 4th of May, meant to jumpstart an Afghan peace process and sketch out a possible political settlement concerning the Central Asian nation. The planned 10-day summit will include the United Nations and Qatar. With Bureau Inputs, World Today Desk, DD India.
Well, let's now get this into perspective on what exactly is happening there in that peace process. You know, it's a pivotal moment when one would look at it, especially in the peace process in Afghanistan. But what are the steps that now take place? Well, American troops will leave Afghanistan by September 11th. That's the deadline that's now been announced. What would it mean? It would mean that the new deadline coincides with that 2001 terror attacks. US would miss that May deadline that was settled for a pullout. Why that could not be or why it was difficult to meet? It was difficult to meet for the simple reason the US troops somewhere felt that, you know, if such a decision was taken to withdraw on May 1st, it would put the US forces at risk. Well, this particular battle has been for peace. You know, the search for peace in Afghanistan has been a long drawn battle. But what are the reasons why this particular peace process has hit roadblocks after roadblocks, or even after 2 decades we don't see something that's very clear, that's very much grounded there, or some blueprint that gives a lot of hope? Why? First, there is no lack of political vision when it comes to handling this particular issue. There is no political clarity from the time this invasion has begun. Second, there are question marks about the effectiveness of the US strategy when you talk about this particular issue. Third, the fact that each side is trying to break what has become more of a stalemate. You know, you move an inch, you give an inch to the other party is not ready to move back. It's rather taking that inch and increasing the set of demands that they have. Fourth, an increase in violence by the Islamic State militants in Afghanistan that has been continuing, and there is a big fear that this particular withdrawal may lead to a civil war in Afghanistan. Finally, there is also a role that is being played immensely by Afghanistan's neighbor, that's Pakistan, that's in question. So a lot of questions, lot of question marks, still very much not clear. Last time around, what was promised, this time around, the way things have moved, did they have much more on the table? Or was Biden left with not much to choose from when it comes to handling this particular issue, especially when it comes to pull out of US troops? Almost 20 years there in the deserts of Afghanistan. Can they do something different this time around? Well, to get a perspective on this particular story, I have Vivek Kaju, former Indian ambassador to Afghanistan, joining us this evening on World Today. Good evening, sir. First things first, when you look at the decision that's been taken, you know, shifting from that May 1st deadline to September 11th, do you somewhere feel that Joe Biden and the US president had not much of an options, you know, considering what was spoken about a month earlier and to the decision that they have arrived at when it comes to withdrawal of soldiers?
There is one basic fact about Afghanistan, and that is that President Biden wishes to leave Afghanistan, wishes to withdraw his troops from Afghanistan. This particular decision once again reinforces that desire, makes it manifest.
Okay.
The question is, will he succeed? There have been many deadlines in the past, many plans, and this is one more plan. It is attracting attention, as it should, because this is the plan of President Biden, who is the new American president, comparatively new. It remains to be seen whether it will succeed, because President Biden, like his predecessors, who also wished to withdraw American troops, does not want to leave chaos behind. I think it's quite clear that that is something that America cannot afford. The clip that you played of the American representative speaking on this decision said that America has achieved its objectives. Indeed, the capacity of any terrorist group, international terrorist group, to establish itself so firmly in Afghanistan as to once again launch a terrorist attack, especially on the American mainland, like the Al-Qaeda did in 2001, is now very remote. But chaos produces a vacuum, and a vacuum can be filled by all kinds of nasty elements. So, quite clearly, President Biden also wants to withdraw. He wants all foreign troops to go. But it remains to be seen what will happen between now and 9/11, because the Taliban, for one, and you played that out, have said that they will not participate in any talk. Now, the talks are slated to begin on April 24th, so we still have 10 days. It again remains to be seen if within these 10 days, the Taliban and American negotiators can come up with some kind of a compromise which will ensure that the Taliban take part in talks in Turkey. That is crucial. So we'll have to wait and watch.
Mr. Kaju, we are looking at timelines that have been set time and again. Do you somewhere feel timelines being set but no conditions being set, and that's the big cause of concern even now when one looks at the September 11th timeline or deadline?
Look, what conditions can be imposed? I've said this for a long time, and let me repeat it. The Americans have suffered a strategic reverse, if not a strategic defeat in Afghanistan. They've been there for almost 20 years now. They've put in everything that they could, but they've not achieved military success.
True.
And the reason for their not achieving military success is the role of Pakistan. That is the fourth point that you mentioned in your commentary on what has been responsible for this great mess in Afghanistan. The Americans decided not to go into Pakistani territory to drain the swamp. And the swamp provided opportunities for the Taliban to have sanctuaries from where they were immune from any hostile or aggressive American action. And I think it does not require any rocket science to understand that unless the bases of an enemy group can be destroyed, that group or that force will remain. So that has been the biggest infirmity of American policy, and they've paid a terrible price for this. But they are now left with, frankly, they are left with no alternative but to negotiate with the Taliban, and they are no position to impose conditions.
But somewhere, Mr. Kaju, do you somewhere feel this, this particular withdrawal timeline that's been set, does it serve more as a catalyst, and does it put more political pressure, especially on the Afghan administration, to get talking before that deadline that's set?
The Afghan administration can only talk if the Taliban come on the table. If they don't come on the table, who do they talk to? So, the Blinken letter, which was released some weeks ago, quite clearly indicated that pressure was being put on the Kabul authorities, on the Afghan authorities, especially on President Ghani, to come to the negotiating table.
True.
But that was premised on on the ground that the Taliban were willing and would come and discuss the future. For that, that draft peace plan was also prepared. And I'm confident that American negotiators and the Taliban have been in very serious and intense and extensive discussions in Qatar. But as of now, the Taliban have indicated that they're not willing to go for these talks unless all foreign troops, as they say, leave. So some kind of a compromise has to be reached. And that cannot be through conditions, because the Taliban perceive that they have the upper hand at the moment in Afghanistan. And that is the crucial point.
Mr. Kajut, what's the sense that you get, now since they are not ready to come on the table to discuss and, there is a deadline that's already been drawn. Can the Taliban be trusted in the first place, looking at the way things stand, and now that there is a clear call from the American president with regards to withdrawal?
In this game, no one can be trusted. Groups, entities, states act on their interests.
Okay.
And the Taliban, of course, should have an interest in achieving their objectives through negotiations, especially as the perception is that they have the upper hand.
Okay.
But then the Taliban is the Taliban. And it remains to be seen if their thinking leads them to believe that they can achieve success on the negotiating table too. I, for one, feel that the next 10 days are going to be crucial. If the Taliban can be persuaded through some concessions, which I'm sure they will demand, to come to the negotiating table, then then some kind of movement can be there in the political and diplomatic sphere. But otherwise, if the Taliban don't go to Istanbul, then all this plan that President Biden has unveiled will be dead in the water. And he will have then two stark choices, that he can withdraw all troops and NATO troops can go, leaving behind a terrible vacuum, which the Taliban will fill, and there can be chaos. Or he can he will have to remain, or the third alternative is that some kind of a compromise is achieved during these 10 days. The Taliban join the negotiations and proceed further.
Mr. Kaju, Mr. Anthony Blinken had indicated that, American troops will withdraw, but they wanted some kind of a UN peacekeeping force to come and take stock of the situation there. Do you still see the possibility of that to happen, considering, this particular moment of time, it looks like the Taliban would be celebrating with this decision or with the way things stand?
Well, the involvement of the UN in President Biden's plan has always seemed to me that the Americans are seeking company in reverse, in their reverses, so that they can share the reverses that they are facing with other countries. But I don't think that this kind of a policy is going to succeed. On the other hand, what are the alternatives for the Americans? So it's a bad scene altogether. And we'll really have to wait and watch for the next 10 days. And thereafter, it will be a long, bumpy road full of imponderables and difficulties.
Mr. Kaju, somewhere do you get the feeling that America wants to get out of the war in Afghanistan, but they don't want to get out of Afghanistan on a totality when they're looking at UN as an option?
Look, which country will be willing to send troops as part of a UN peacekeeping mission? But a UN peacekeeping mission can also only come when there is something tangible, when there is a ceasefire. And that is, at the moment, doesn't seem possible unless negotiations take place. So all this talk of a UN force at the moment is highly premature.
Mr. Kaju, one final word before I let you go. As we arrive at a date when it comes to the American troops withdrawing, do you somewhere feel, what could be the next chapter, in this long book when you look at it when it comes to Afghanistan?
The Afghan situation for more than 5 decades has been extremely difficult to predict in its twists and turns. And that is the same situation which is now. I think we have to be prepared for any contingency. There are different scenarios that can unfold. One is that the Afghan leadership, both in Kabul and the Taliban, find wisdom enough to come to some compromises in terms of a ceasefire, in terms of power sharing, and also in terms of what would be the future political setup in Afghanistan. That is one scenario which seems unlikely at the moment, but it is there. It can't be ruled out. The other is that the Americans, despite all these plans that President Biden has unveiled, will have to remain, and it will continue to be a sticky situation as it is today. And the third, of course, is that the Americans say that, we are fed up and we are leaving, and it is now for the Afghan parties and for neighboring countries to work things out, in which case I'm afraid it's going to be a very nasty situation, and there'll be enormous violence, and it will go back to, I'm afraid, what we saw in the 1990s.
Okay, a grim picture there, but we'll leave it there. Thank you and appreciate you joining us this evening on World Today, giving us your insights on the political developments, especially in Afghanistan and American president's decision to pull the troops out by September 11th. Well, moving forward now to news from Asia. Well, Bangladesh began the first day of the 8-day-long hard lockdown on Wednesday, with roads having low traffic and most of the shops in Dhaka being closed except those for daily essentials like fruits, vegetables and grocery shops. Though 14th April happens to be the Bangla New Year and Pohela Boishakh, which are considered days of celebration for the people, the streets were deserted and there was no festivity visible in the city, as Bangladesh is battling hard to control the spread of COVID-19 with lockdowns since April 5th. The second phase of the lockdown, called a hard lockdown, started on Wednesday and will be enforced till 21st of April. As per the government directive, no public transport is allowed to operate in the city. Buses are off-road, trains, waterways and flights have been cancelled. Offices are closed. However, the factories are open under the supervision of a specially constituted team to ensure compliance with health directives of the government. Emergency and essential services are allowed to open. Police have asked people not to come out of their homes except in case of emergency. A system of movement pass has been put in place by the police to allow people to come out of their homes in unavoidable and emergency cases. In other towns and cities of Bangladesh like Pabna, Bhola, Cox's Bazar, similar reports are being received. The presence on the road is considerably low and vehicular traffic is very thin. Bangladesh is under countrywide lockdown from 14th to the 21st of April to control the spiraling cases of COVID-19 in the country. Well, for more inputs on that lockdown in Bangladesh, we've got Prasar Bharati correspondent Rakesh Jha joining us on the phone line. Good evening. Joining us live on World Today. Rakesh, good evening. Purely looking at the way things stand, how has been the demand? First things, how has been the demand for movement pass? Is there an uptick when people are coming forward asking for movement passes? Or are people, very much understanding the situation there on ground zero and staying at homes?
Well, Anil, yesterday the police came up with a figure that when they introduced the system of movement pass, through an app that they had launched. Every minute, there were 1,500 people applying for it.
Okay.
But today, according to the reports that we are receiving, very few people are showing the movement pass. Although the number of people venturing out of the homes is very low. I was out for a while and I tried to see around. There were people on the road, very few people. And the police say that out of these people, very few of them have been showing the movement pass. So the fact remains that although the lockdown, the hard lockdown as it is, or strict lockdown as it is being called, seems to be working on the ground at most of the places because vehicles are very few and the shops are closed, except as you said in your report, except for the grocery. You know, today begins, the Ramzan has begun today and people are going out to buy at least the fruits and other things for their iftar and sehri functions. Other than that, very few people are there. And I have been looking at some of the reports coming out from other parts of the country. By and large, there seems to be a successful lockdown in the country, and most of the people have been observing it. I would like to point out that the things continue to be extremely grim. Today again was the worst day in the COVID-19 fatality. If you look at it, 96 people died. This is the highest number of people who have died due to COVID-19 since March last year, when the first case was reported.
Okay.
Although the number of people infected has gone down slightly from over 7,000 to over 5,000 this time, yet the death figure is very high. The positivity rate of the samples is also quite high.
Okay.
Almost 21 to 22% people are found to be COVID positive from the samples being collected. But in the whole situation, the government of Bangladesh has been trying hard to balance two things. One is that they are trying to protect the life of the people by imposing the lockdown, and yet they are trying very hard to protect the livelihood also. The government has allowed the factories to remain open. You know, ready-made garment is the biggest, is the sector which contributes 80% of the export earning of Bangladesh, and it employs several million people. It is the largest sector in Bangladesh in terms of the employment and in terms of the revenue that it gets. On the other hand, today, there is another very important announcement. As you know, the public transport has been shut down. Air traffic, railways, buses have not been flying. But today the government announced that they would be starting special flights to places like Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Oman, the places where a large number of Bangladeshi migrants go and earn and send money from there. So the government, despite the ban on the flight, is going to operate these special flights from Bangladesh to these countries because it doesn't want its own people to suffer the issues related to unemployment which they might have got in those countries. So the government has been trying hard and struggling hard to maintain the livelihood and the balance between livelihood and saving lives of the people, Anil.
Well, Rajesh, also, put this into perspective. Now, if the factories are going to be working and if there are no modes of transport that are there for people to travel, how do these people reach these places of work? Is there some kind of arrangement that's being done so that these people can travel, and as a result of which the export, which you said is 80% of the contribution to Bangladesh's growth story, that does not get hampered or that does not hit a speed breaker?
Very true, Anil. There has been a lot of criticism of the government on this score that the earlier lockdown, the one which started on 5th and which continues till 13th, even there they have decided to let their factory open. Now, what they have done is to put the onus of bringing the people on the owners of the factory, and they have constituted 23 kind of special squads which will go from factory to factories and check if the factories are able to ensure the health safety measures announced by the government. As far as the transportation of the people is concerned, it remains a big issue. But a large number of people stay in the close vicinity of the places where they work, and the factories which are going to remain open will have to provide them with some kind of a special transport service for bringing these people to to the factories and then dropping them back. There are practical problems. They have also been asked to make sure that if there are medical issues with the workers, for example, if somebody is detected to be having COVID, they will take care of it. Now, the Technical Advisory Committee wanted a complete shutdown in the sense that they didn't want anything to be open. But the government is under tremendous pressure to maintain the livelihood of the people also. So I can understand that there is a great kind of pressure on the government to maintain a balance between the two. But of course, this factory issue is a big issue before the government.
Okay,
and let's see how it pans out.
Okay, a big issue there, but I appreciate you joining us this evening on World Today, and we ask you to take good care of yourself. We'll come back to you, over the next 1 week, getting more updates from the neighboring country, Bangladesh. Well, moving now to our next story. Japan and South Korea are all set for a showdown. What's the reason? Well, Japan has decided to dump over 1 million tons of treated Fukushima water into sea, and South Korea has expressed strong regret over Japan's decision to dump this radioactive wastewater from the crippled Fukushima nuclear power plant into the Pacific Ocean. Let's take a look at this report.
The ties between South Korea and Japan are getting strained. Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga announced on Tuesday the government's decision to discharge contaminated wastewater in Fukushima prefecture into the sea despite domestic and international opposition. Experts say the Japanese government's plan to dump radioactive water into the sea is a reckless decision that defies the will of the people. Koyama Ryota, a professor of the Faculty of Food and Agricultural Sciences with Fukushima University, believes this is a unilateral decision made by the Japanese government. The Japanese society believes that the proper disposal of radioactive wastewater from the Fukushima nuclear power plant is related to the international public interest and the vital interest of neighboring countries, so all parties concerned should participate in the process so as to effectively avoid further damage to the marine environment, food safety and human health.
It has yet to disclose detailed messages on how to dispose of nuclear wastewater and which research institutes it is working with on wastewater treatment. Tokyo Electric Power has made a lot of mistakes leading to a confidence loss among the public. Can it really regain the trust through actions in the next 2 years? In addition, the Japanese government's decision to discharge nuclear wastewater into the sea at present also left it a negative image. Can it reverse this negative image? If not, the nuclear wastewater discharge into the sea may meet big obstacles in the future.
After this, South Korean President Moon Jae-in ordered officials on Wednesday to explore petitioning an international court over Japan's decision to release water from its Fukushima nuclear plant.
President Moon called for proactively looking into ways to refer Japan's decision to release contaminated water from its nuclear plant to the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea, including filing for an injunction. He said, "I cannot help but say that there are many concerns here in Republic of Korea about Japan's decision to release contaminated water from its nuclear plant as the country that is geologically closest and shares the sea with Japan." President Moon said Ambassador Koichi Aiboshi is probably well aware of the concerns of the South Korean government and people and asked him to convey such worries to Japan.
Japan unveiled plans to release more than 1 million tons of contaminated water into the sea from the plant crippled by a 2011 earthquake and tsunami, starting in about 2 years after filtering it to remove harmful isotopes. South Korea strongly protested against the decision, summoning Koichi Aiboshi, Tokyo's ambassador in Seoul. A series of protests against the move by politicians, local officials, fishermen and environmental activists took place in South Korea on Wednesday, including in front of the Japanese embassy in Seoul and consulates in the port city of Busan and on Jeju Island. Bilateral relations between Seoul and Tokyo are already at a very low point, while it improve or hit another low remains to be seen. With Bureau Inputs, World Today Desk, DD India.
Well, Union Minister for Environment, Forest and Climate Change Prakash Javadekar addressed an event titled From Paris to Glasgow, Stepping Up Global Action on Climate Change in their bid to tackle environmental issues at a panel discussion on climate change. Jean-Yves Le Drian, the Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs of France, was also present at the event. Addressing the event, Union Minister said that India is the only G20 country to negotiate on the Paris Treaty, and India has shown more than it had promised.
I am very happy to report that India is the only G20 country to walk the talk on Paris Agreement. United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP, Climate Tracker, Climate Performance Index, all such surveys have adjudged India one of the best countries on performance from 95 to 2000, from 2015 to 2020. Many countries have forgotten their pre-2020 commitments. We have done more than what we promised. And therefore, we are the only G20 country. We have increased our tree cover by 15,000 square kilometers. We have declared 26 million hectares target of land restoration. The degraded land to be restored is 26 million hectares by 2030. And we are also walking the track there. We have reduced our emission intensity by 26% as I stand before you. We have promised 35% by 2030, we'll achieve more. But if I say that we'll achieve more and Prime Minister has declared 450 gigawatts,
well, Russian envoy to India, Nikolai Kudusev, today briefed the media on the outcome of the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov's visit to New Delhi on April 6. The Russian ambassador reiterated that ties between both the countries remain equal, solid, comprehensive and coherent.
Our ties remain equal, solid, comprehensive, coherent and forward-looking despite any global turbulence. They are based on universal principles of interstate relations, international law, the United Nations Charter, as well as respect of each other's interests. We are very satisfied with the detailed discussion on a wide range of bilateral and international topics. It confirmed proximity of our approaches and exceptional level of mutual understanding and trust.
Well, let's now take a look at updates on COVID-19 from across the globe on purely the numbers on how they are stacked up. More than 13 crore 81 lakh people worldwide having so far tested positive for COVID. Total recoveries 11 crore 11 lakh people recovering from coronavirus. Dead toll, the stock number 29 lakh 75,000 lives lost worldwide. United States of America continues to be the worst affected country by the COVID pandemic, both in terms of infections as well as fatalities. In terms of infections, over 3 crore 20 lakh people testing positive for COVID. More than 5 lakh 77,000 people have died in the United States of America due to COVID. Well, pharmaceutical giant Pfizer CEO has said that the company has ramped up production of its COVID-19 vaccine and can deliver 10% more doses than expected to the United States by the end of May. Company said it had conducted an assessment of the vaccine safety data and had found no evidence of blood clots. The White House said it was confident that there would be no significant impact on the vaccination drive in the world's hardest hit country, where almost half of all adults have now received at least one dose of the vaccine. Well, moving to sports stories now. Kante's tireless midfield performance steered Chelsea to a first Champions League semi-final in 7 years despite a 1-0 quarter-final second-less loss to FC Porto. Mendy Taremi's stunning overhead kick in the second half added time put the squeeze on Chelsea, but the Blues still progressed to the semi-finals 2-1 on aggregate. They will now meet either Real Madrid or Liverpool in their first semi-final since losing out to Atletico Madrid in 2014. Mason Mount and Ben Chilwell's first leg goals proved decisive in the end. Taremi's late acrobatic planted a seed of doubt, but Porto produced too little too late, and English club Chelsea deservedly moved into the last four. Paris Saint-Germain knocked out holders Bayern Munich of the Champions League on away goals despite losing the second leg of their quarter-final tie, 1-0. Mauricio Pochettino's men have edged to a thrilling first leg 3-2 win in Munich that saw Neymar being denied by the woodwork twice before Eric Maxim Moting bundled the Germans in front with a close-range header just before half-time. Bayern, though, could not find another away goal as the French club PSG progressed to the semi-finals. Missing the injured Robert Lewandowski, the German side lacked their usual ruthlessness up front and were unable to find the second goal that would have continued their trophy defense. Kylian Mbappe, though, had sealed the tie with just over 10 minutes to go, but after breaking clear and firing in the assistant flag rule, PSG will either face Borussia Dortmund or Manchester City in the semi-finals, with City holding a 2-1 advantage going into Wednesday's second leg in Germany. Well, April 14th will mark the 100-day countdown to the Tokyo Summer Games. The countdown to the delayed Tokyo Games is on with 100 days to go to the opening ceremony on the 23rd of July. Tokyo 2020 Organizing Committee have faced challenges is quite an understatement. Global pandemic and a one-year postponement aside, Tokyo 2020 had to replace their president after he resigned amid public outrage over sexist remarks. For the committee's part, however, they appear to have navigated those difficult moments. They appointed a female president in Saiko Hashimoto and added 12 new women directors to the board, meaning women now make up to 42% of a committee previously dominated by men. A Western Japanese city cancelled the Tokyo Olympic torch relay over spiking coronavirus cases on Wednesday, fueling fresh fears about whether the pandemic postponed games should go ahead with just 100 days until the opening ceremony. Even as Tokyo unveiled installations featuring the Olympic rings and mascot to celebrate the 100-day milestone, organizers face a monumental challenge as the virus surges. Organizers have barred overseas fans and postponed test events, but they insist preparations are on track. Well, cancellation is certainly not on the table. That's what the International Olympic Committee Vice President has clarified. And India today marked the occasion with a special event with elite athletes from across different disciplines taking part in an online seminar with the Union Sports Minister. Well, let's now see what's all making headlines across the globe in our next segment.
The United States has said that they expect its relationship with Russia to remain a challenge. The White House hopes that they can work together on arms control issues, the Iran nuclear deal and other issues. US President Joe Biden proposed a summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin during a telephone call on Tuesday and underlined US commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Russia has seized Crimea from Ukraine in 2014 and has increased the tension in recent weeks. Russia's defense minister said that the country's massive military buildup in the western region of the nation was part of practice drills amid threats from NATO. He added that maneuvers in western Russia would last for another 2 weeks. Defense Minister Shoigu said that NATO was planning to deploy 40,000 troops and over 15,000 military units of equipment close to Russian territory. A large buildup of Russian forces close to Ukraine's eastern border and in Crimea has escalated tensions in recent weeks. Argentine protesters marched on the International Monetary Fund in Buenos Aires with a big basket demonstrating their symbolic demands. The South American country attempts to renegotiate its multi-billion-dollar debts to the IMF and the Paris Club group of creditor nations. The centre-left President Alberto Fernandez's government is scrambling to renegotiate the roughly $45 billion the country owes to the IMF. In Mexico, the government has deployed over 12,000 officials in southern part to deal with an increase in migrant arrivals. Foreign Minister Marcelo Ebrard said that flows of migrant children were at unprecedented levels. Ebrard also said that officials consisting of National Guard members, National Migration Authority staff and health and welfare officials had been working in various southern states to help tackle the challenge. A commercial vessel owned by an Israeli firm was attacked off the coast of the UAE in Gulf waters, pro-Iran media and an Israeli television channel has said. Israel's top-rated Channel 12 quoted unnamed Israeli officials as blaming arch-foe Iran for the assault, which it described as a missile strike. There were no casualties and the ship continued on its course. Officials in Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office and Israel's Defense Ministry declined comment on the incident. A spokesman for Israel's Transportation Ministry said he was aware of the reports but could not confirm them. The incident comes a day after Tehran accused Israel of sabotaging a nuclear site and after Iran and the US began indirect talks in Vienna on ways to revive world power's 2015 nuclear deal with Tehran. In France, military training became high-tech for French officer cadets who took part in drills along with rowboats in western Goa. The drills, which took place between March 29th and 31st, saw cadets from the Combined Arms School. Various combat situations were reproduced, with cadets using rowboats for reconnaissance, support, cover as well as mules. The rowboats used include the infamous Boston Dynamics Spot rowboat and several pieces of equipment produced by French hardware firm Nexter. St. Vincent took a cemented grey look after rain mixed with the hot ash emitting from the La Soufriere volcano blanketed the whole city. The volcano had its most powerful explosion on Monday after decades of inactivity, pumping dark clouds of ash some 10 kilometers into the air. The residents steered clear of outdoors as the ash clogged the air and fused with the rain, making it difficult to walk or drive. No deaths have been reported so far, but roughly a third of the island is off limits and airspace remains closed, while power and water supply is intermittent in some communities. The eruption prompted evacuation of many nearby residents. In Spain, a massive fire broke out inside an industrial park near Cesena. Thick plumes of smoke were also visible in capital Madrid. According to Madrid Region Emergency Services, at least 4 industrial buildings covering an area of 52,000 square meters were affected by collapsed decks and burnt down walls. A gas station near the fire was also evacuated to avoid greater damage. However, no injuries or fatalities were reported and the cause of the fire is not yet known. With Raul Castro due to step down as head of the ruling Communist Party at its Congress this week, Cuba is ready to enter a post-Castro era since its revolution in 1959. The Congress will also address the island's severe economic crisis, pandemic response and signs of growing dissent. The Congress's Communist Party's most important meeting held every 5 years to elect party leadership and set guidelines. Raul had made it clear in 2016 that it was the end of leadership by historic veteran leaders. The young brigade of leaders is, however, not expected to change the one-party socialist structure, but it will be under pressure to make market-adaptive changes to tackle economic challenges.
Well, let's now turn the pages of history and see all the major events that took place on this very day, 14th of April.
On 14th April 1931, Spain was declared republic after King Alfonso abdicated and fled the country. Spanish Republic, commonly known as the Second Spanish Republic, was the form of government in Spain from 1931 to 1939. On this day in 1951, British trade unionist and statesman Ernest Bevin died. He was one of the most powerful British Union leaders in the first half of the 20th century. He proved to be a forceful Minister of Labour and National Service during World War II and a Foreign Secretary in the immediate post-war period. On 14th April 1995, female panda Yan Yan from Beijing arrived at Berlin Zoo on a 5-year loan. Yan Yan was sent to Berlin in the hope that she would produce offspring with the zoo's mascot, Bao Bao, who at 26 was the world's oldest panda in captivity. Yan Yan died without bearing cubs. On this very day in 1999, NATO missiles struck a convoy of Albanian refugees in Kosovo. Yugoslavia said 70 people were killed. On April 14, 2000, Russia's Duma, which is the lower house of parliament, ratified the START II nuclear arms reduction treaty. The upper house followed suit on April 19, 2000. START II, or Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, was a bilateral treaty between the US and Russia on the reduction and limitation of strategic offensive arms. On this day in 2002, Hugo Chavez returned in triumph to his presidential palace 2 days after resigning. The coup was the first of a string of conflicts between the Chavez government and the opposition, clashes that continued to polarize Venezuelan society into two bitterly opposed camps. On April 14, 2003, American forces in Baghdad captured the leader of a Palestinian terrorist group, Abu Abbas, during a raid near southern Baghdad. Abu Abbas was the mastermind of the 1985 hijacking of the Achille Lauro cruise ship. On 14th April 2007, a Canadian journalist, author and human rights activist, June Calwood, died at the age of 82. He was often described as Canada's social conscience. On this day in 2009, former member of Beatles George Harrison was honored posthumously with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. On April 14, 2013, a terrorist attack on a popular hotel in Mogadishu, Somalia, left at least 16 people dead, including 5 assailants. Over 200 people were rescued after a raging gun battle. On this day in 2016, Britain's Duke and Duchess of Cambridge visited Bhutan. The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge spent time with another glamorous young royal couple when they received a private audience in Bhutan's capital with the King and Queen of the remote Himalayan kingdom. World Today Desk, DD India.
Well, remember, the fight against COVID-19 continues, and follow the simple steps of SMS. S stands for sanitizing yourself, M stands for masking yourself at all times, and the other S stands for social distancing. Follow these 3 simple steps and the fight against COVID-19 continues, because we care not only for ourselves and our loved ones, but we care for humanity at large. So do not forget, the fight against COVID-19 continues, and one needs to be careful at every time as you step out of your house. Well, that's it from me in this edition of World Today. We're going to be back again tomorrow, same time, same channel. Until then, goodbye, take care, have a safe and wonderful evening ahead. Bye-bye.